Hi, folks. Robert Quigley here, Washington, D.C., the Money Pit Group. As everybody knows, we're forming an independent political party across the United States, and we're headed to the White House. Today, we're going to talk about the defense of Taiwan, Taiwanese defense. And we're going to follow it up with a little bit of practical slash theoretical slash most likely scenarios that could very well be developing before our eyes. So let's start with the simple and the facts. Taiwanese defense and resource wars. Well, what we've seen in the last couple of weeks, folks, we've seen a weak Biden administration, a very weak Democratic Party when it comes to issues of state security. Biden has flip-flopped. The State Department has flip-flopped. There is no question about it. The United States has no choice but to defend Taiwan without doubt, 100%, until the last man is left standing, or woman. There's no choice in this. And playing a strategic ambiguity game is simply going to encourage the adversaries. It makes us look weak. Let's start from basic principles. If we elect a weak president and vice president, the country looks pathetically weak in the eyes of bullies. And this is exactly what's happened in this administration. Let's dig a little bit deeper. I will fully recognize an independent Taiwan. When we get to the White House, that will be one of my first orders of business. I will travel to Taiwan. We will take a lease on one of their airfields and ship bases, probably like a 100 or 200 year lease. We will heavily, substantially defend Taiwan. We will make sure that Taiwan has the best porcupine defense possible. Why do we need Taiwan? Well, a couple of issues that should not be overlooked. Taiwan supplies the world with the best semiconductors available. The digital world as we know it, which basically means the current world as we live, cannot exist without Taiwanese semiconductors. Furthermore, going all the way back to the Eisenhower days, it has been a strategic prerogative, a cornerstone of American Asian defense, that Taiwan is a floating aircraft carrier permanently stationed off the coast of China. This is called the Eisenhower Doctrine. All democracies must defend each other. No question about it. And as we've discussed before, Taiwan is the first fully functioning democracy in Chinese history. There was one 3,000 years ago. It didn't last that long. It was totally unstable. So Taiwan gets to wear that hat. And as we all know, I'm no fan of Chinese manufacturing. I'm all for cutting China off 100%. I meant to say we're no fan of Chinese manufacturing. Taiwanese manufacturing we're all in favor of because we need those semiconductors. But Chinese manufacturing, I am no fan. Let's look a little bit at the history of Taiwan. As everybody knows, China claims Taiwan as its own. This is not truth. It is true that the government that ruled all of China came to an end in 1948, and what was left of that government retreated to the island of Formosa, what we call Taiwan today. However, for a 50-year period before that, Taiwan was in fact owned by the Japanese. And the only reason why the Japanese lost it was because they lost World War II. Now, before the Japanese, we have a very long history stretching hundreds of years where the island was barely populated, going to populated by various peoples from the Chinese-speaking world, the Filipino world, the Japanese world. Taiwan was owned by the Portuguese at one point. Taiwan was owned by the Dutch at another point. There's still Portuguese and Dutch cemeteries in Taiwan. So for China, the Communist Party of China today, to say that they own Taiwan is absolutely ridiculous, because the Communist Party of China has never had 1 second's worth of control over Taiwan. And when I'm in the presidency, their dreams will come to an end of controlling Taiwan. So now those are the facts. If we elect weak leaders, career politicians that have never been down in the trenches, who have never lived in the places and situations that are so near and dear to America's heart, we are going to look foolish and weak. We're entering a new phase. We're going to call this the resource war stage. Now we're going to move ahead a little bit here, and we're going to move from the world of concrete fact to a little bit of strategic analysis, a little bit of hypothetical analysis, if you will. But just to finish up the last point, when we have situations like Hunter Biden's laptop taking $11 million from the Chinese, it was done so they could buy influence in America. This is the kind of problem that I was referring to earlier. If we lost Taiwan, our front line would be Hawaii. That would be the western front line in the Pacific. We can't lose Taiwan. Okay, let's move a little further afield. Planet is running out of stuff. There's no question about this. If we step back and think for a second and wonder, was the Russian invasion of Ukraine the start of a very long period of hot resource wars? Let's think about this for a second. Where is the world's population concentrated? In India, we've got 1.1, 1.2 billion people. China, we have 1.4, 1.5 billion people. Well, right there, we got 2.5, 2.6 billion people right there in Central Asia. And once a number gets that big, it grows at an exponential rate. China is already running out of fresh water. India is running out of fresh water. Farming land is decreasing. Quality of soil is decreasing. One only needs to look around the Chinese society and Indian society. We see people living and dying on the streets in poverty. We see standards of living stretched. A good way to picture this is a balloon. Human population is the air in the balloon. As more and more air is pumped into that balloon, just like as more and more people are pumped into the Chinese and Indian world, the more certain there's going to be a pop. That balloon is going to explode. Did Russia start the resource wars? That's a strong possibility. We have to keep an eye on the horizon. We're seeing a belligerent China. There's nothing for China in Taiwan. Absolutely nothing. Taiwan can defend itself with American help. It's an island country, very few places to land on. All of its mills have national service. It would be bloody, but they can defend themselves. What does China get out of Taiwan? It gets nothing, except it excludes America from its front door. So if one were trying to engage in resource warfare or any kind of warfare, wouldn't the first step be to keep your enemies as distant as possible, aka the threat to take over Taiwan? Well, let's wonder just a little bit. We have seen in the last 100 days that the Russian military is in fact weak. They love to brag. They love to bluff. It's all bluster and mostly blunder. It doesn't look like Russia would be able to repel or defend an invasion from China. So that raises an interesting hypothetical question. We know that resource wars are coming simply because the world is running out of stuff. We know Russia has behaved in the most brutal, extreme, callous, uncaring way toward the Ukraine. I wonder if we should not put a couple of options on the table. Maybe we should say to the Chinese and the Europeans and the Koreans for that matter, Russia can't defend itself. Why don't we divide Russia? It's filled with natural resources. It's got a callous, harsh, undeserving population. Russia cannot defend itself against China. If NATO came from the west, China came from the south, even the Koreans coming from the east, Russia has no ability to defend itself. It's a hypothetical, I know, and I don't have a telephone line to the leaders of China or Korea for that matter, but who knows, maybe this message will get to them one day. It is a possibility, and it would be poetic justice for Russia. Now, there's another option. As you know, as an independent candidate for the White House, we want to support a one world government, even if that one world government has an extremely narrow jurisdiction. Because one way that we can begin to solve the problems of the world is to knit the world closer together. We still have a lot of work to do to take care of the folks of the world. Resources are going to become scarce. CO2 and methane in the atmosphere are out of control. We have so many big projects to work on, and we must do it as a global team. So, on the one hand, we could just simply take over and divide the spoils of Russia, because that central part of Asia is going to explode like a air-filled balloon before long. Or we can form a one-world government and try to solve all these problems peacefully. Maybe we can do both. And then, of course, the most dreadful option of them all, and the one that nobody wants to talk about. But what happens if we do get 10 million people on the planet? What happens if peace totally breaks down everywhere? What if there is no more law and order? In this situation, it is very fortunate that we live in North America and we are surrounded by oceans. It's also very fortunate that some of our allies, like Australia, England, Iceland, all islands surrounded by water. But what happens if, between global warming eliminating large swaths of the world as habitable places to live and human catastrophe, is there a nuclear option? It's unthinkable. I know. And it's the most theoretical and hypothetical of this discussion. But what I'm saying, folks, is the world is changing. And in the next 10 to 15 years, starting 5 years from now, starting a few years from now, but in this time period, we're going to see massive hardship increase beyond anyone's reasonable belief. And we're going to be faced with difficult questions. We're going to need leaders that can analyze the facts, that can put history aside, and that can make decisions that fit the times. There you have it, folks. My discussion today on the Taiwanese defense and resource wars. Please subscribe to the channel. Add your comments below. Join the conversation. Let me know where I'm right. Let me know where I'm wrong. Let me know where we can do better. Until we meet again,